My question deals with transportation.
Okay.
This past General Assembly session, we saw transportation reform pass for the first time in 30 years. What are ways we can continue to improve transportation in the Hampton Roads, Newport News, and Williamsburg areas?
Good question. The transportation compromise that passed the General Assembly this year was a good first step. And it was just that. Because the last time we allocated revenues to transportation in Virginia, I was a sophomore here at William & Mary, and I'm getting ready to celebrate my 25th anniversary. So we've had decades of inattention to the transportation structure. So this was a good step. Expanding the Interstate 64 3 lanes up to Williamsburg, good step. Fixing the Fort Eustis interchange, good step. But it simply kicks the can up the road. In my business, I land at Patrick Henry in Newport News at 11:50 near midnight. Some nights as I come on Interstate 64, where it goes from 3 lanes to 2, it's backed up. Not always, but often at midnight. So we have got to immediately now set proper priorities and be pleased with what we've done, but now look towards Queens Creek. How do we cross Queens Creek in an environmentally acceptable manner? Because 3 lanes all the way to and from Richmond is the one big step that we have to achieve. Our tourist base comes from the north, so we cannot stop until we get there. We've got to properly prioritize, and the third crossing from southeastern Virginia is a good step. You know, the 460 toll road that they did, if this is good for the ports, I'm going to be supportive of growing and expanding our biggest natural asset. But 11,000 cars travel 460 a day. They're hoping to double that to 22,000 and significant truck traffic. You know how many cars go across Hampton Roads Center Parkway every day? 168,000. So we have got to prioritize where our money is properly spent. And remember that because there's been no additional revenue associated with transportation in the last 30 years, the crossing to Norfolk was built in 1958. We have decaying bridges and pylons and structures that we've got to look at as well. So it's a good first step. But there's a lot of work left to be done.
Delegate Watson, same question. What are ways we can continue to improve transportation in Hampton Roads, Newport News, and Williamsburg areas?
Well, let me tell you what we had when I first ran for office. Again, 2 years ago, I'd never run for office. I'm going around about to be a freshman delegate, and I've got people, what are you going to do about transportation? How are you going to fix I-64? And frankly, the first thing you asked, I have no idea. And I've done it for 27 years. They've tried everything they could do. And they couldn't get anything done. But what I knew I couldn't do and shouldn't do is to stand in the way. That's one of the reasons that I did not sign a no tax pledge. I am adamantly against raising taxes unless it's absolutely critical. But this was a plan that came through that was the only plan we were going to be able to get through the entire General Assembly. They've always tried these one-size-fits-all. And the problem with that is folks in Grundy, they don't want to pay for tunnels in Hampton Roads. People in Hampton Roads are tired of sending their money up to Northern Virginia. By taking the approach we did, by having a blanket tax that addressed the entire state, that came from the entire state, and then regional taxes where the money, by law, must be spent on transportation in the region where the taxes were raised. This was something that we could get enough votes to actually get through. And so I eagerly supported that bill. Not only did I support it, I co-patrored it. When I ran, after I ran and after I won, one of the first things I did was start taking notes as I went up and down 64. Having an engineering background, it's just a bad habit of looking every time you go over a bridge, you make a mark. Every time you look at something that's a ravine or something that's going to ask for money. And right after my first session, I asked Secretary Connaughton to come to my office in Williamsburg. He came and he visited with me, and I actually laid out the maps that I had drawn. I said, Secretary, everybody that I've talked to so far has been talking about 64 from Newport News to Richmond. Absolutely, we've got to address it. It's a huge issue. But you're talking anywhere from $4 to $7 billion, depending on which options you take. We're not going to get a $7 billion check stroked anytime soon. I want to do this in segments. I want to focus on the areas first that are most critical. And one of the first areas, of course, is between Newport News and Williamsburg. I also give him information, things he needed on the letter. I'll see my red cards, I'll finish with this. When the governor introduced his plan, I got a call from Secretary Connaughton, and he said, Delegate, I want you to know that section you talked about, I carried it to the governor, and he's made that part of his priority plan in the governor's transportation plan. Today we have a plan, we have for the first time in 27 years, funding that we can spend on highways and projects. Now I'm on the HRTPO, and I can help assign those priorities. I've been going to these meetings, and we've got a great plan underway. I-64 tomorrow night, you can find out what the status is, because we're already doing surveying, and we'll be breaking ground.
Mr. Mason, you have a 1 minute.
Well, I'm a government history guy, so you don't want me analyzing bridges, but I know that I sit in parking lots in Newport News for 30 minutes because I'm so early for my appointments because I can't afford to be late. I know when I'm stuck in traffic, and I know when 3 lanes to 2 stops at 199, wait until you see people getting off at 143. Wait till you see people getting off at 199. It's going to clog our secondary roads up here in Williamsburg. So it is a great first step. Critical first step. The Fourth Eustis interchange is a disaster. Anybody would say that. So it is a good and important priority, but we have to keep plugging forward. Proper priorities and putting that money to transportation, but don't forget the rail structure. Rail ridership in Williamsburg and Newport News has steadily increased the last 3 years. My wife just took it and it was on time. One of the 43% they were taking. But we need to have better coordination with CSX. We have to do something about the rail yard, and it is, talk about a huge number, but it's something we have to look at high-speed rail, but along 95 corridor. We can't keep our eye off the ball. We've got to take our eye off the ball. It's about roads and putting this funding in proper places. But they're constant work streams that are in concert with each other that we have to focus on.
In the 1 minute I've got, I'll address on the remainder of 64, because it's critical that we ultimately work towards a long-term solution all the way to Richmond. And undoubtedly, one of the challenges we're going to have, because their funding isn't going to be in here immediately for the Fort Eustis interchange. So that's why it's important that we have leadership in the General Assembly who can work with the CTB to help fill some of those gaps. Commonwealth Transportation Board, they are in charge of the money that comes from the entire statewide fund, as well as from our highway trust fund that comes in. They're the ones that determine where we spend the money. This is where leadership in the General Assembly is important. On the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, we voted to make 64 the #1 priority in Hampton Roads. But we're going to need help with that to finish that job out. And that's why we're working with the CTB to make that happen. Senator Norman couldn't be a louder voice and stronger voice. There couldn't be one in Virginia, what he's doing to work on that. And from the House side, I've been one of the most effective delegates in the General Assembly, even as a freshman, and I'll help make that happen too.